Thank you for tuning in to leaddeveloper.com, where we simplify complex property development feasibilities, investment analysis, and everything real estate. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, our Google Sheets-based feasibility suite streamlines the toughest aspects of real estate. Lead Developer Feasibility Suite is trusted by thousands in over 17 countries. Our tools cover everything from quick assessments to detailed cash flow projections and more. Sign up today at leaddeveloper.com for unlimited free access to our expanding library of real estate tools. No credit card needed. Plus, get full support through Edge with step-by-step guidance, exclusive courses, and resources designed for your success. Turn numbers into narratives that win over investors and lenders. Join Lead Developer now.
Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling real estate development.
It's a pretty fascinating world.
Yeah, and specifically, like, how developers decide if a project is actually worth it.
Right, right.
So the source that we're going to be looking at today are excerpts from an article titled Residual Land Value vs. Profit Margin, the Winner.
Okay.
And it lays out some key formulas and concepts that we're going to unpack.
Yeah.
But by the end, you should have a better understanding of, how developers think.
That's the goal.
Which is helpful, whether, you're considering a project yourself or just curious about all the forces that shape our cities.
Absolutely, yeah. It's such a complex world with a lot of factors involved.
So the article kicks off by contrasting these two key concepts.
Yeah.
Residual land value and property development profit margin.
Right.
Can you walk us through, what those actually mean?
Sure. Think of residual land value as the maximum amount a developer should pay for a piece of land. But it's based on its potential. So it's almost like starting with that finished project, your dream outcome,
Okay.
and working backwards to see if the cost of the land actually makes sense.
Right.
Profit margin, on the other hand, is all about how much money the developer puts in their pocket after all the expenses are paid.
Okay.
So it's more about the project's overall profitability.
So residual land value is like
Right.
setting a budget for the land even before you start.
Yeah, got it.
And then profit margin is like what you actually walk away with
Just
at
it
the
done.
end.
Yeah.
So then the article highlights what they call this golden rule of development.
Okay.
Project profit must be greater than project risk.
It seems pretty simple, but there's actually a lot to unpack there.
Okay. Let's unpack it then. What does that actually look like in the real world?
Okay, so let's say you've got two projects.
Okay.
One's a pretty standard apartment complex in a stable market, so pretty low risk.
Yeah.
The other is this luxury condo tower in a rapidly changing area, much higher risk. A developer would expect a much higher profit margin on that riskier condo project
Right.
to compensate for all that uncertainty.
Higher risk, higher reward. Got it.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah. But how do you even begin to calculate that profit? I have to admit the article walks through a real-world example, and seeing all those numbers kind of made my head spin a little.
Yeah, I hear you. There are a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
But the key takeaway is that developers can't just focus on that big revenue number at the end.
Right.
They have to meticulously account for every single cost. Construction materials, labor, permits, land costs, professional fees, taxes, every little thing.
Wow.
It's only after you subtract all those expenses from the final sale price that they arrive at their actual profit.
It sounds like more than just the glitz and glamour of the finished building.
Oh, for sure.
It's really about the detail.
It's all in the details.
Yeah.
And that attention to detail extends to how they actually determine the value of the potential development site in the first place.
Right.
It's not as simple as just looking at size or location.
Which is where I think things get really interesting for anyone who wants to understand this world a little bit better. The article goes beyond just simple square footage, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it outlines different ways to value a site. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so you've got your basic price per square meter or square foot, which is crucial for comparing properties to make sure you're comparing apples to apples.
Right.
But even then, you need to be paying attention to the specifics.
Okay.
Are we talking about gross leasable area,
Okay.
which includes shared spaces like hallways,
Okay.
or net leasable area, which is just that usable space that you can rent out?
Yeah.
That can really change your calculations.
So two properties at the same square footage could have really different values.
Oh, absolutely. It really depends on how that space is being used.
Right.
And then another method that's often used, especially for residential projects, is price per unit. This one's super relevant when you're considering higher density housing, like apartments or condos.
So I guess the more units you can fit on a piece of land,
Yeah.
the more potential profit there is.
In theory, yes.
Hmm.
But you got to remember zoning plays a huge role here.
Okay.
So let's say you have two sites that are the same size.
Okay.
One is zoned for single-family homes.
Right.
The other allows a multi-unit building.
Okay.
That zoning restriction immediately changes the potential value and profitability of the land.
Wow. So it's not just about size, it's about what you're allowed to actually build.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And then for commercial projects, where zoning can be even stricter, there's price per plot ratio meter.
Okay.
This is a way of taking into account how much you can actually build on a certain area.
Okay.
It kind of shows that the highest price per square meter doesn't automatically mean the best deal.
So let's say a developer has found the perfect site, crunched all the numbers, they're ready to build. How do they predict the final market value of the developed property?
Right.
Because, I mean, that's where their profit comes in.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The article outlines 3 main methods for predicting market value,
Okay.
each with its own strengths and weaknesses. The first is direct market comparison.
Okay.
So this involves looking at similar properties that recently sold in the area
Okay.
and then adjusting the price based on the differences between them.
So find something comparable,
Yeah.
adjust for any differences,
Yep.
and boom, you've got your value.
It sounds simple, but finding truly comparable projects is tricky. There are always variations in size, features, location, even just the timing of the sale.
Oh, okay.
Making those adjustments accurately is where the expertise really comes in.
Right. So it's more art than science.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
The second method is called the actual cost method.
Okay.
Here you estimate all the costs involved. Land, construction, professional fees, everything. And then you just add your desired profit margin to get that target selling price.
Okay. But I'm guessing it doesn't always match reality.
You got it. It completely ignores market demand. What if nobody's willing to pay that price?
Yeah.
What if the market cools down or there's some new trend that impacts buyer preferences? You could end up with a property that's overvalued and hard to sell.
Okay, so then the third method must take those market factors into account.
It does. It's called the income method.
Okay.
It's specifically for those income-generating properties.
Like apartment buildings.
Exactly, office spaces. Instead of focusing on costs, it looks at the potential rental income.
Okay. So how much rent could you collect?
Precisely. You project that potential income, factor in things like vacancy rates, operating expenses, and then you use what's called a capitalization rate to figure out the overall property value.
Capitalization rate.
Sounds intimidating, I know.
Yeah, a little bit.
But essentially, it's a way to measure the rate of return an investor would want on that property.
Okay. Taking into account the risk associated with the investment.
Right.
So riskier property. Higher cap rate needed to attract investors.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Would you rather put your money in a stable, low-yield savings account
Mm-hmm.
or a riskier investment with the potential for higher returns?
Makes sense. Higher risk, higher reward, right?
Exactly. So you divide the net operating income,
Okay.
which is your rental income minus expenses,
Right.
by that capitalization rate, and that gives you an estimate of the market value. It's balancing the potential income with the perceived risk of the investment.
Okay. So even with all of these calculations and all these careful considerations, there's still this big unknown.
Right.
The future. I mean, the market is always changing.
You're absolutely right.
Mm.
Predicting the future is always the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
A great example is the whole rise of remote work.
Mm-hmm.
Before the pandemic, developers were heavily invested in office space,
Right.
city centers. But with so many people working from home, that demand has shifted completely.
And some developers are scrambling to adapt their projects to this new reality.
So even the most careful calculations can get thrown off
Oh, yeah.
by unforeseen events. It sounds like flexibility is key.
Absolutely. Staying informed about those market trends and being able to pivot is so important.
It sounds like there's so much more to real estate development than meets the eye.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we've gone beyond that simple notion of location, 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 right?
Definitely.
And we've uncovered all of these complex financial considerations that developers have to grapple with.
We've just scratched the surface.
Right. Before we dive into that next layer, let's just recap what we've learned so far.
Okay.
We've talked about how developers use residual land value
You know,
to determine the maximum they'll pay for land,
right.
and how profit margin represents their actual earnings.
After deducting all expenses.
We've explored all these different ways to value a development site, going beyond simple square footage to consider zoning regulations and potential rental income.
Yeah.
And finally, we've talked about the importance of staying informed about market trends and being adaptable,
Being ready for anything.
which leads us to a question that we haven't really touched on yet.
Okay.
You know, the article we're looking at is all about maximizing profit.
Yeah.
But what about the other impacts of development decisions?
Right.
The impact on communities, the people who live there. We'll explore that more in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, it's a question I think every developer has to wrestle with, right?
Yeah.
That balance between financial success and the impact on the surrounding community.
Right. Because a shiny new skyscraper might boost profits, but what if it pushes out longtime residents or overshadows like a historic neighborhood?
Exactly.
Then you start thinking about affordable housing, environmental sustainability, access to green spaces, even just the aesthetics of a neighborhood.
Yeah,
It's a lot to consider.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why responsible development goes beyond just those financial calculations that we talked about. It involves engaging with the community, understanding their needs, their concerns, and really working to create projects that benefit everyone.
So it's not just about what we build,
Right.
but like how we build it.
Exactly.
And for whom.
Yeah. And that's actually where a lot of those market trends come back into play.
Right.
Changing demographics, lifestyles, new technologies, they all shape what responsible development looks like.
Yeah. For example, with online shopping being so big these days, do we really need more sprawling malls?
Right.
Or could those spaces be repurposed for something that's more community-oriented?
Exactly. Maybe affordable housing,
Right.
parks, co-working hubs for remote workers.
Yeah.
It's about thinking long-term.
Yeah.
The sustainability of the project and the community, shifting from a purely financial mindset
Yeah.
to one that really considers those social and environmental impacts as well.
And it's not just about being altruistic, right?
Right.
I mean, these kinds of considerations can actually be good for business in the long run.
Of course.
If a project is well integrated into the community, if it's environmentally conscious, if it meets the needs of the people who live there,
Yeah.
it's going to attract more tenants, more buyers, more investors, right?
Absolutely. When a development enhances the quality of life for the people who live and work there, it becomes more desirable. And that translates into value.
So are there actual examples of developers like successfully taking this more holistic approach?
Oh, definitely. Some are incorporating green roofs, solar panels to reduce their footprint. Others are partnering with local organizations to include affordable housing units within their developments.
Okay.
It's all about finding those creative solutions that address multiple needs.
Yeah. I've even seen projects that like transform old industrial sites into like really vibrant community centers.
Oh, yeah.
They preserve a bit of history while also creating something new and valuable.
Right.
Bringing new life to a space that maybe people had forgotten about.
And those kinds of projects often have this ripple effect. They attract further investment and they revitalize the whole neighborhood.
It seems like the real estate development industry is kind of at a crossroads, right?
Maybe.
You have that traditional profit-driven model,
Yeah.
but there's this growing awareness of the need for a more responsible, community-focused approach.
And it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Right.
The most successful developers will find that sweet spot,
Yeah.
that balance between financial viability and really creating projects that make people's lives better.
I love that phrase, finding that sweet spot. It
Yeah.
really suggests that like doing good and doing well don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Exactly. And it requires a bit of a shift in mindset,
Yeah.
moving away from seeing the community as just a backdrop for development and more like a partner.
Moving from an extractive model to a collaborative one.
Yeah.
So how does that collaboration actually work?
Well, it can take a lot of forms. Community meetings, design workshops where residents provide input, partnerships with local organizations, even just developers, genuinely listening to the concerns of residents and incorporating that feedback into the design.
Yeah. So it's really about building that trust, right?
Exactly.
And finding those win-win solutions.
It is, and I think it leads to better developments overall.
Yeah, I think so too.
When you move beyond that traditional approach and you genuinely engage with the community, you tap into all this knowledge and these perspectives.
Yeah.
It's amazing what can come out of that collaboration.
It makes you realize that the most successful projects are the ones that create value for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And that value isn't always financial.
Right.
It could be increased access to affordable housing, better public spaces, a reduced environmental impact, a stronger sense of community pride. It's about leaving a legacy that goes beyond just the building itself.
So for our listeners who are thinking, wow, this is really cool, and they might want to get involved in shaping their own communities, what advice would you give them?
Well, I'd say start by getting to know what's happening in your own neighborhood. Go to community meetings. Do a little research. Talk to people who live and work in the area. Become what I like to call a citizen urbanist.
I love that.
Citizen urbanist.
What does that actually look like, though?
It means being informed and engaged. The more you know about what's going on, the better equipped you are to advocate for the kind of development you want to see.
Right.
Don't be afraid to reach out to developers, architects, city planners. Ask questions, share your ideas. Your voice matters.
It's a good reminder that shaping our cities is a team effort.
It really is.
Yeah.
And every voice counts. We all have a stake in creating these thriving, sustainable communities.
This has been such a great conversation. We started by really digging into those financial formulas behind development,
Yeah,
but we've really explored a much bigger picture, haven't we?
we have.
The role of developers in building these thriving, sustainable communities.
It's a good reminder that development isn't just about building structures. It's about building a better future for everyone.
And that leads us to this really fascinating question.
Okay.
If profit isn't the only driving force, what are some alternative models that really put community benefit front and center?
Right.
We're going to explore that more as we continue our deep dive. Okay, so we've talked about the financial side of real estate development. We've talked about the ethical considerations. But are there alternatives? Like, are there models that really put the community first?
Yeah, there's this really interesting shift happening that's gaining momentum. It's called community-driven development.
Okay.
It's all about residents having a say.
So instead of developers coming in with a plan that's already, set,
Right.
they're actually working with the community from day one.
Yeah, exactly. Building those partnerships, understanding the community's needs, and working together to create those win-win solutions.
It sounds like that requires a lot of trust from everyone involved.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's totally different from that traditional top-down model.
Yeah.
Developers need to be willing to listen,
Yeah.
be flexible,
Yeah.
to adapt,
Yeah.
and even compromise.
Right. But I imagine the payoff could be huge.
Totally.
A project that really reflects the needs of the community is going to be way more successful in the long run.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Plus, it can lead to these super creative solutions that
Yeah.
you might not get from that traditional process.
Right.
It's about tapping into the wisdom and creativity of the whole community.
Are there examples of this, like community-driven approach in action, something our listeners can, learn from?
There's a really cool project in Copenhagen
Okay.
called the Mountain Dwellings. It combines affordable housing with a parking garage and a rooftop garden.
Oh, wow.
It's so unique because it was really designed collaboratively.
So residents were more than just at the table.
Yeah.
They were really involved in the process.
They were involved in the whole process. And it led to some really neat stuff. For example, the residents really wanted a place to gather.
Okay.
So they incorporated this big terrace
Okay.
with amazing views of the city.
That's awesome.
And it became like a central hub for the community.
Yeah. It's cool that the best ideas come from the people who are actually going to be living there.
Exactly. And it's not just happening in Europe.
Right.
Here in the U.S., we're seeing more community land trusts and cooperative housing models.
Okay.
These really allow residents to take ownership of their neighborhoods
Yeah.
and create the type of housing they actually want and need.
So it's about shifting the power.
Yeah,
Giving more agency to the people.
totally. And it goes beyond housing, too.
Okay.
We see this community-driven approach with parks, public spaces, renewable energy, all sorts of things.
It's really about communities, like taking back control. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And recognizing that development doesn't have to be this zero-sum game.
Mm-hmm.
When it's done right, it can create wins for everyone involved.
This has been such an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
You've come a long way.
We have.
Started with the financial formulas, then we talked ethics, and now these really inspiring community-driven alternatives.
I think it's been a really great look at how we can shape the world around us.
And for our listeners, I think the takeaway is this. development isn't just something that happens to us.
Right.
It's something we can be a part of.
Mm.
We all have a voice.
Yeah,
And that voice matters.
absolutely. Whether you're going to community meetings or just paying attention to what's happening in your neighborhood, we can all play a role in creating the kinds of cities and towns we want to live in.
So as you go about your day to day, take a look around. Look at those buildings, those parks, all the spaces in your community. Ask yourself, who benefits? Who is involved? And how can we all help build a better future for the places we call home? That's something to think about. And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, keep exploring.